A mother's worry begins. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as it wove its way through the quiet streets of Greenwich, a neighborhood known for its pristine homes and immaculate gardens. Diana Wilson pulled her coat tighter around her, stepping out of her sleek Tesla Model Y, the morning sun glinting off its polished surface. She took a deep breath, glancing up at the townhouse she had purchased 3 years ago, a decision she had made to ensure stability for her daughter after her amicable divorce from Michael, a highly regarded pediatrician. Inside, the kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm toast, a morning routine Diana took comfort in. She glanced at the framed family photo on the kitchen island, her daughter April, smiling between herself and Michael during a summer trip to Martha's Vineyard. Though their marriage had ended, they had both agreed on one thing. April's happiness came first. "April, time to go," Diana called, adjusting the pearl earrings she always wore. "Coming," an excited voice chirped back. 8-year-old April, dressed in a pink gingham dress, bounced into the room, her honey blonde curls bouncing with her. She had her piano homework folder clutched in one hand, the other stuffing a last spoonful of cereal into her mouth. "Don't eat so quickly," Diana gently scolded, though a smile played on her lips. April swallowed quickly and grinned up at her mother, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mom, Dad's coming to my piano recital on Sunday, right? He made dinner reservations at Old Penguin." Diana nodded, smoothing a hand over her daughter's soft hair. "Of course, sweetheart. Dad's really looking forward to it, and I can't wait to hear you play." April beamed, hugging her mother before grabbing her backpack and skipping toward the door. As Diana watched her daughter rush off to join her classmates at Greenwich Academy, she couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. Lately, something felt off. The growing concern. Diana's work as a luxury real estate agent kept her occupied, but her thoughts often drifted to her daughter. April had always been a bright, cheerful child, but something in her demeanor had changed recently. It was subtle, yet undeniable. She wasn't as talkative after her weekend visits with her father. Her usual stories about their time together had dwindled into brief, vague responses, and though she never complained, her energy seemed drained after those weekends. The concern gnawed at Diana as she walked into her real estate office on Greenwich Avenue, her phone buzzing with a message from Michael. "Michael, all set for Sunday's recital. April's performing third. Let her know not to be nervous. Catherine will be there too." Diana's brows furrowed. Catherine, Michael's sister, had been appearing in April's life more often. She was a wealthy investor's wife, a Vassar graduate, and an absolute perfectionist. But what worried Diana most was Catherine's growing influence over April. A routine haircut turns into a nightmare. That evening, as part of their usual mother-daughter routine, Diana took April to Bella Hair Studio, a charming Victorian-style salon tucked away from the main street. "Lisa," Diana greeted the experienced stylist who had been handling their hair since the divorce. Lisa smiled warmly. "Diana, April, ready for a trim?" April nodded but seemed oddly quiet. Normally, she'd chatter excitedly about school, her piano lessons, or even the latest book she was reading. But today, she simply sat down without a word. Lisa fastened the white cutting cape around April's neck and began combing through her hair. Then, suddenly, her movements slowed. She parted a section of April's scalp under the salon light and froze. "Mrs. Wilson," Lisa's voice was careful, measured. "You might want to take a look at this." Diana's stomach clenched. She stepped behind the chair as Lisa adjusted the lighting to reveal multiple circular patches of missing hair. Uneven, unnatural, with bare white scalp showing beneath. Diana's breath caught. "Oh my God, April." Her daughter squeezed her eyes shut, her tiny hands trembling in her lap. "Mom, don't look," she whispered, voice cracking with emotion. Diana's heart shattered. How had she not noticed this before? How long had her daughter been suffering in silence? Lisa cleared her throat, her professional demeanor softening. "This looks like alopecia areata, Diana. It's an autoimmune condition that causes sudden hair loss, usually due to stress." Stress. April was 8 years old. What kind of stress could cause this? Diana crouched beside April, gently cupping her small face. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell me?" Tears welled up in April's big blue eyes. I didn't want you to worry." Diana swallowed the lump in her throat, stroking her daughter's cheek. "Honey, it's okay to tell me when something is wrong. I need to know so I can help you." April bit her lip, hesitation flickering across her face before she blurted out the words that changed everything. "Please don't tell Dad." Diana's heart skipped a beat. "Why?" April shook her head violently, gripping Diana's hand. "Just promise me, Mom. Please." Her tiny fingers clung desperately, as if afraid that telling the truth would shatter something irreparable. Diana forced a calm smile, though her pulse raced. "Okay, I promise." But deep inside, her mind was already reeling. What was happening at Michael's house? And why was April so afraid to let her father know? A mother's instinct takes over. Lisa finished the haircut with delicate precision, shaping the layers to conceal the bald spots. As Diana paid the bill, Lisa gently placed a business card in her hand. "Dr. Jennifer Sanders," Lisa whispered. "She's a specialist in autoimmune conditions. If this is stress-related, she might be able to help." Diana nodded, sliding the card into her wallet. She needed answers. As they drove home, April held onto her mother's hand tightly, her small palm clammy with unspoken fear. Diana had never felt more determined in her life. Whatever was causing her daughter's distress, she was going to find out. And she would do whatever it took to protect her child. No matter what. The unspoken fear. The drive home was eerily quiet. The usual chatter about school, books, and piano practice was replaced by the rhythmic hum of the Tesla's engine. Diana gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She kept stealing glances at April through the rearview mirror. Her daughter sat in the back seat, gazing out the window, her little fingers twisting the hem of her dress, a nervous habit she'd had since she was a toddler. Diana's mind was racing. Stress-induced alopecia. At 8 years old, she had tried to reason with herself. Maybe it was just the stress of balancing school, piano lessons, and weekend visits. Maybe it was nothing. But the way April had begged her not to tell Michael, her own father, made something inside Diana's chest tighten. A mother's instinct was never wrong. Something was going on, and she was going to find out what. A mother's doubt. As they pulled into the driveway of their townhouse, April let out a small yawn. "Go inside, sweetheart," Diana said, trying to keep her voice calm and warm. "I'll be right there." April hesitated for a second before nodding and hopping out of the car, her small feet padding up the steps and into the house. Diana, however, remained in the driver's seat. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to Michael's number. Her finger hovered over the call button. For the past 2 years, their post-divorce relationship had been amicable. They had worked hard to keep things civil for April. But now, for the first time, she felt hesitation. What if he dismissed her concerns? What if he didn't believe her? What if? No. Diana set her phone down. This wasn't about Michael. This was about April. And if her daughter didn't want her father involved, at least not yet, she needed to respect that. The late-night revelation. That night, as Diana tucked April into bed, she brushed her fingers through her daughter's freshly cut curls, her mind still clouded with worry. "Mom." Diana looked down to see April's wide blue eyes staring up at her. "Yes, sweetheart." April hesitated before whispering, You really won't tell Dad." Diana forced a soft smile and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Not if you don't want me to." April exhaled in relief and snuggled under the covers. "Thank you, Mommy." Diana waited until her daughter's breathing evened out before stepping out of the room and closing the door gently. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Michael. Catherine just got back from Europe. She's bringing April a surprise this weekend. She's really excited to see her. Diana's stomach twisted into knots. Catherine again. For months, Michael's sister had been inserting herself into April's life, showing up unexpectedly on their weekends together. Diana had brushed it off before, thinking it was just Catherine trying to be the fun aunt. But now, with April's sudden stress and hair loss, she had to wonder, was there more to it? Was Catherine the reason April was scared? A visit to the specialist. The next morning, Diana made an appointment with Dr. Jennifer Sanders, a leading specialist in childhood autoimmune conditions. Greenwich Medical Spa had a reputation for excellence, but what truly reassured Diana was that Dr. Sanders was known for her warmth and compassion, two things April desperately needed. "April, sweetheart," Diana said gently as they pulled up to the clinic. "Dr. Sanders is just going to take a quick look, okay? Nothing scary." April nodded, but Diana noticed how she gripped the seatbelt tightly, her little fingers turning white. The waiting room smelled of lavender and fresh linen, designed to calm anxious patients. Diana signed them in, and within minutes, a nurse led them into an examination room. Dr. Sanders, a petite woman with kind hazel eyes, greeted them warmly. "April, I've heard you're a very talented pianist," she said, smiling. "What are you playing for your recital?" April brightened just a little, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mozart's Sonata in C major." "That's beautiful," Dr. Sanders said. "I'd love to hear it someday." She turned to Diana. "Mrs. Wilson, would it be all right if I have a quick chat with April alone?" April tensed, her fingers gripping Diana's arm. Diana smiled reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll be right outside." April looked hesitant, but finally nodded slowly. The truth begins to unravel. 15 minutes later, Dr. Sanders called Diana back in. April sat on the examination table, her head down, her little hands resting in her lap. Dr. Sanders sat beside her, her expression gentle yet serious. "Mrs. Wilson," she began, her voice soft but firm, "April is showing signs of significant emotional distress." Diana felt her heart plummet. She's been experiencing high levels of anxiety, which can trigger conditions like alopecia areata. Based on what she's shared with me, I believe her stress is coming from her weekends away from home. Diana's blood ran cold. She mentioned feeling pressured at her father's house, Dr. Sanders continued. But what stood out to me most was how often she mentioned her aunt, Catherine. Diana's stomach churned. "What about Catherine?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. Dr. Sanders hesitated. April didn't say anything outright concerning, but she did say that Catherine often talks about beauty, about how a girl should always be perfect and presentable. And April seems to believe that something is wrong with the way she looks. Diana's chest tightened. She had always taught April that beauty wasn't everything, that she was loved for who she was, not for how she looked. But if Catherine had been feeding her different ideas, she also mentioned, Dr. Sanders added carefully, that Catherine often does her hair during their weekends. April seemed uncomfortable talking about it, but I got the impression that she doesn't like it. Diana's hands curled into fists. Catherine, her ex-husband's sister, had always been obsessed with image and perfection. Even before the divorce, Diana had found her comments about presentation and refinement irritating, but she had never thought much of it. Now, she wished she had. Now, she wondered just how much damage Catherine had already done. A mother's silent promise. That night, after April had fallen asleep, Diana sat at the kitchen island, staring at her phone. "Michael, I was thinking we could take April to the botanical gardens after the recital," Catherine suggested. "She's really excited to spend more time with April." Diana's jaw clenched. "Catherine." Again. Slowly, she typed out a response. "Diana, I need to talk to you. Alone. Tomorrow." Her heart pounded as she hit send. She had let things go for too long. And now she was done staying silent. She had promised April she wouldn't tell her father. But she never said anything about Catherine. Something was going on, and Diana was going to put an end to it, no matter what it took. The silent war. The next morning, Diana Wilson woke up with a sense of urgency that burned deep inside her. The conversation with Dr. Sanders had left her shaken, but more than anything, it had left her furious. Not at April, not even at Michael, but at Catherine. Catherine, with her pristine designer dresses and carefully curated life, had somehow convinced an 8-year-old girl that she wasn't good enough. And that was unforgivable. Diana glanced at the clock. 7:45 a.m. April was still asleep, curled under her pink floral duvet, her breathing soft and even. Diana brushed a strand of hair away from her daughter's face, noticing how much thinner it had become. Her fingers curled into a fist. She couldn't let this go on any longer. Michael needed to know. A tense meeting. At precisely noon, Diana walked into the Meridian Cafe, a cozy but upscale spot in Greenwich where she and Michael had often met to discuss April. Michael was already there, sitting by the window, stirring a cup of black coffee. His pressed navy blazer and neatly trimmed beard gave him the usual air of quiet professionalism. But today, Diana wasn't in the mood for pleasant conversation. As she took her seat, Michael looked up. "You sounded serious over text. What's going on?" Diana took a deep breath. "She's losing her hair, Michael." Michael's hand froze over his coffee. "What?" "She has alopecia areata. It's stress-related." Michael leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "Stress? From what?" Diana hesitated before saying, "Catherine." Michael blinked. "Catherine? What does she have to do with?" April told Dr. Sanders that Catherine is constantly talking about beauty, about looking perfect and presentable. She's been doing April's hair during weekends, Michael, and April is clearly uncomfortable with it. Michael leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. "Diana, I think you're overreacting. Catherine loves April. She's just..." "No." Diana's voice was sharp, unwavering. "I know Catherine. I know how she is. She thinks she's helping, but she's hurting April instead. And if you don't see that, then maybe you're not paying attention." Michael ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. He hesitated. "I don't want to believe that my sister would do anything to hurt her." "She probably doesn't even realize she's doing it," Diana admitted. "But that doesn't mean we can let it continue." Michael was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "All right. I'll talk to her." Diana felt a brief moment of relief, until Michael added, "But let me handle it." Her eyes narrowed. "Michael, I'll talk to Catherine this weekend. But until then, don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be." Diana clenched her jaw. She knew exactly what that meant. Michael didn't see this as an emergency. But she did. And if he wasn't going to handle it fast enough, then she would have to take matters into her own hands. April's confession. That night, as Diana tucked April into bed, she hesitated for a moment before sitting on the edge of the mattress. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "can I ask you something?" April, already in her pajamas covered in tiny music notes, turned to look at her. "What is it, Mommy?" Diana chose her words carefully. "Did something happen with Aunt Catherine?" April immediately stiffened. Diana's heart sank. Slowly, April curled up under her blankets, gripping them tightly in her little fists. Diana gently touched her daughter's arm. "Sweetheart, I need you to tell me the truth. I won't be mad. I just want to help." April swallowed hard. Then, in the smallest, quietest voice, she whispered. She said Daddy might not want me anymore, if I don't look perfect. Diana's stomach dropped. "What?" she breathed. April looked away, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She said, "Daddy is busy, and that he needs me to be perfect and well-behaved, and pretty so that I don't bother him too much." She said, "If I look messy or if I don't take care of myself, he might not have time for me anymore." Diana felt like screaming, like marching to Catherine's house that very moment and demanding to know what kind of person says something like that to a child. But right now, April needed her to be calm. Taking a deep breath, Diana gently cupped her daughter's face. "April," she said softly but firmly, "that is not true. Daddy loves you no matter what. He will always have time for you. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anything except exactly who you are." April sniffled. "You promise?" Diana kissed her forehead. "I promise." And this time, she wasn't going to sit back and wait. This time, she was going to make sure Catherine understood exactly what she had done. The confrontation. 2 days later, Diana stood in front of Catherine's massive estate, her hands clenched into fists. She had debated whether to call first. But no, Catherine didn't deserve a warning. She rang the doorbell. A moment later, Catherine opened the door, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and elegant silk blouse making her look as composed as ever. "Diana," she said smoothly. "What a surprise." Diana didn't waste a second. "You lied to April." Catherine's smile didn't even waver. "Diana, I have no idea what you're talking about." Diana stepped forward, her voice low and sharp. "You told an 8-year-old child that her father might not love her if she wasn't perfect. Do you have any idea what that's done to her? She's losing her hair, Catherine. She's afraid of disappointing Michael. She's afraid of disappointing you." Catherine's expression flickered, just for a second, but then she sighed dramatically. "Oh, Diana, you always overreact. I was simply trying to teach her the importance of presentation. It's a skill that will benefit her in the long run. She needs to learn to." "No." Diana's voice was sharp as a knife. "She doesn't need to learn anything from you. You don't get to decide what's best for her. You don't get to make her feel less than. And from this moment forward, you are not allowed near my daughter." Catherine scoffed. "Michael won't agree to that." Diana's jaw tightened. "Oh, he will," she said, "because I'm going to tell him everything." Catherine opened her mouth, probably to argue. But Diana didn't wait to hear it. She turned on her heel and walked away. She had won this battle. Now she just had to make sure Michael saw the truth. And if he didn't, then she would fight. Because April deserved better than this. She deserved the truth. And Diana was going to give it to her, no matter what. Breaking the cycle and finding strength. The sun was setting over Greenwich when Diana finally pulled into her driveway. The confrontation with Catherine had left her shaken, but not regretful. She had done what any good mother would, protect her child at all costs. But now came the hardest part, getting Michael to see the truth. As she stepped inside, April was curled up on the couch, her tiny fingers wrapped around a well-worn stuffed bunny she had since she was a toddler. The way she held it, the way she curled into herself, it was clear that something had been weighing on her tiny shoulders for far too long. Diana sat down next to her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I talked to your dad. We're going to make some changes, okay?" April's lips quivered. "Am I in trouble?" Diana's heart cracked. She cupped her daughter's face, holding her gaze with nothing but warmth and reassurance. "No, baby, not at all. You've done nothing wrong. But Aunt Catherine, she won't be telling you those things anymore. She won't be doing your hair anymore, either." April blinked up at her little body visibly relaxing at those words. Then something strange happened. For the first time in weeks, April smiled. "Really?" she whispered. Diana nodded. "Really?" And in that moment, she knew she had done the right thing. Michael finally seized the truth. The following evening, Michael arrived at Diana's house. The second he walked in, he ran a hand through his hair, looking like a man who had just had his world flipped upside down. "You were right," he said before she even had the chance to speak. Diana raised an eyebrow. "I usually am." Michael let out a long breath. I talked to April. She told me everything. The comments about being perfect, the pressure to look a certain way. I had no idea Catherine was saying things like that. Diana crossed her arms. Because you didn't want to see it, Michael. You've always idolized your sister. You think she's flawless. But she's not. She put her own insecurities on an 8-year-old girl. And April paid the price. Michael exhaled sharply, guilt flickering in his eyes. I told Catherine she won't be seeing April for a while. At least not unsupervised. Relief flooded Diana's chest. Good, she said firmly. Because she's not coming near my daughter until she proves she understands what she did. Michael nodded slowly. He looked around the living room, his eyes settling on April, who was in the next room, drawing at the dining table. She looks better already, he murmured. Diana followed his gaze. It was true. There was something lighter about April now, like a weight had finally been lifted from her tiny shoulders. She just needed to know she's loved, Diana said softly. Without conditions, without expectations. Michael's expression turned pained. I should have seen it sooner. Diana sighed. Maybe. But you see it now. That's what matters. For the first time in years, Diana and Michael felt like partners again. Not in marriage, but in something even more important. Parenthood. Healing begins. A week later, Diana took April to the salon again. Lisa, the stylist, smiled warmly as they entered. Back again, huh? Lisa said, gently running her fingers through April's hair. April nodded, this time without flinching. Lisa's hands moved carefully over April's scalp, checking the areas where her hair had thinned. It's already looking better, Lisa said with a reassuring smile. A little bit of patience, and it'll grow back. But more importantly, she met April's gaze in the mirror. You're still the same wonderful, smart, talented little girl, and no one can take that away from you. April grinned. It was a genuine, carefree smile, the kind Diana hadn't seen in far too long. Lisa carefully trimmed the ends, and when she was done, April looked at herself in the mirror. She studied her reflection for a long time. Then, to Diana's surprise, April touched her own hair and smiled. I like it, she said softly. And just like that, Diana knew they had won. A new beginning. 2 months later, April's hair had begun to grow back. The stress was fading, and so were her fears. Catherine was no longer in their lives, and April had started talking about things that made her happy again. One night, as Diana tucked April into bed, her daughter reached out and held her mother's hand. Mom, she whispered. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for making me feel safe again. Diana's throat tightened. She squeezed her daughter's hand. Always, baby. And as April drifted off to sleep, Diana sat beside her, listening to her gentle breathing. She had once feared she wasn't doing enough, that she wasn't protecting her daughter the way she needed to. But now she knew without a doubt. She had done exactly what needed to be done. And for the first time in a long time, she knew that everything was going to be okay. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.